much. At this time, the loft and the lookout are dismissed.
Okay, that's better. So, a couple things. First of all, somebody right here, I don't know if it was you or your granddaughter or young, had that harmony part down. I heard it coming out over here. Next time I'm giving you the mic. Sounded real good there. Okay, that's not what I want. Why is this not coming up? Oh, I see. How about that? Can you guys hear me now? I don't have the voice right now to yell, so I need to turn this thing up. So thank you all for joining in. For those of you who don't know, for those of you who've come for a couple of years and like bored, why do we sing the same songs every year? That's the first songs we ever sung here, and so it's kind of a special place in my heart because I remember when we did that. I was sitting up here all alone while my wife was on the far side. We had 20-foot pews in here. I was there and she was on the other side, and we didn't have any of this. We had a projector on a stand here, and I'm with my guitar all alone, no band, no people, no fellowship, just me trying to make it work. And it's so fun now to hear all the other instruments come in and now all the other voices and stuff, and it's just like, this is just something that I allow myself every year, like, oh yeah, listen to that now, that sounds like a church. And before it sounded like some guy trying to sing, it was not a good time. So anyway, that's why we do it every year. I think one year we didn't, but we try. So thank you for all participating in that. And we're going to get that Sing Hallelujah down, I can tell. It's already starting to sound good. We're really going to get there. I just want to pick up on one thing. The sign-up sheet for the fellowship dinner is in the back. Please sign up, December 3rd. We're going to be in the Westie Diner, but we're going upstairs at the Westie Diner. I don't know what that means exactly, but we'll figure out when we get there, because we had 50-some people, and they say they hold 65, but that's a tight 65 if you don't mind catching COVID. So we're going to go to a slightly bigger place, and so that's up above it. They have a gymnasium they've renovated, and we're going to be, I think, the first people to use it. It's supposed to hold 100. And if we like it, I hope you really like it, because I think we're going to do Passover there too. So hang on for that. But that'll be later on. I think Passover's in April this year. So that's coming. So please sign up, though. Get that there. Is there anything else I want to pick up on? I already mentioned Amy. Is there anything else I need to mention? No. My wife's saying that's it, so that must be it, because she's always right. She's shaking her head because she knows I'm just making yet another joke. That's like, if I believe that, we'd be better off, though, huh, honey? So I got a little bit of a challenge here today because we are in the middle of a series, this Misconscrewed series we've been on, but it's our birthday. So, you have to make a choice. We're going to preach a birthday sermon day or the sermon series. And I was thinking about that. I remember my father, who most of you know was a Presbyterian minister, and he never changed his series programming, ever. It didn't matter what holiday hit, he just went with whatever it was. I have on audio tape the last sermon he ever preached at Cedarsville Presbyterian Church, which was the church I grew up in. He was in the middle of a series, and he preached the sermon that went right there for his last, and he knew it was his last sermon. He preached that and then left. It's like right in the middle of the series. So I thought, okay, Dad, we'll just go ahead and stick with the series today. But it is our birthday, so I have to say something about that. I feel like I have to say something about our birthday. And so I'm going to try to combine those two things today. But for those of you who kind of know the story, and this is a little bit boring maybe, but some of you don't, or it was a whole year since you heard it, you forgot some of it. Let me pick up some of the details of Spirit Chapel so you know where we are. I kind of want to also give you an idea of where we're going. I think some of you have an opportunity and maybe a desire to know that. What church am I in? What is this thing? And so I want to kind of hit some of that. But this church actually started as Victoria's idea more than mine. I resisted it for 6 months. But to understand how crazy that is, what I just said, when Victoria came to America, and we were going to get married. She came in on what they call a K-1 visa. She had 90 days to marry me or go home. She's still trying to decide if she made the right choice there, but so I married her quick before she changed her mind. We got married like within a week. But before we even got married, she was only here for a couple of days. We're driving down, never forget, 114 in Grapevine, Texas, and she looks over at me and starts talking to me about my family a little bit, which, she's going to be marrying into the family. You can understand that. None of them lived there except my dad. They're all back here in Pittsburgh, but we were in Texas. So she's kind of curious about him, and so she said, so none of your brothers, I have 3 of them, became pastors. I said, no. And you never became a pastor. I said, no, you know me, I'm a tech guy. And she was, She's quiet for a little while, and she says, good. If you ever become a pastor, I'm leaving you. Now, we're still in this moment in our, relationship where we're still deeply in love, right? And everything's great. And it's a kind of weird time to start laying down ultimatums, first of all. Second of all, what a weird ultimatum to lay down. To me, it was like saying, if you ever become a rodeo clown, I'm out. Okay, it doesn't matter. I'm not planning on becoming a rodeo clown. That's fine. I said to her, in fact, I said, that's fine. Weird, but okay, that's fine. Not going to become a pastor. You're safe there. So fast forward, we've now moved to Virginia and then to Pittsburgh, 7 years later or something. We're in Pittsburgh not very long. We found ourselves a little church we're going to. We're happy there. And we're driving down, some of you know the area, Renzi Hill Road, up to Boston Bridge. We're at that red light there. And we're not even talking at the time. We must have lost our own kind of thoughts, And all of a sudden, out of clear blue, we're not talking about anything. She turns to me and she says, if you ever become a pastor, I'm leaving you, right? I said, yeah, I heard you the first time, still not planning on doing it. And she'd forgotten about the time in Texas. I had to remind her. She goes, well, I was right then and I'm right now. If you ever become a pastor, I'll leave you. I said, okay, fair enough. Now, fast forward to about 2 years from there, it's Christmas, and I get this Christmas present from her that I know is a book, because you can tell, I open it up, and the name of the book is The Blessed Church by a guy named Robert Morris. Now, we went to Robert Morris's church. It's Gateway Church in Texas. And I looked at it, and this is an odd book. Because she's all excited. I could tell she's all smiling over there like, I'm like, okay. Was kind of hoping for a new Samsung watch, but good. The book's good too, And so I flip it over to the back and look at it, and this is a book on church planning. And I look at her and said, this is a church planning book. And she smiled, yeah. I said, okay, is this just a long play to divorce me? I need to know. I know you Russians, you think deep, you're chess players, but... So she goes, no, I think we need to start a church. And that's how this whole thing kind of really started. And I thought, well, okay, you're nuts. And, we talked about that for 6 months. And I thought, I can't start a church. I don't even know what kind of church I'd start. Why would I start a church? I don't even get it. I wasn't satisfied with the church we were in. In fact, we were very dissatisfied. We'd grown dissatisfied. And when I started reading the book, he says in it, if you're called to ministry, God's going to call you out of another ministry. And you're going to find something that other ministry is just irritating to you. And that really described my situation, because we'd been in this church for 2 years, fine, and all of a sudden everything was irritating us. They hadn't changed. This church hasn't changed in 150 years. It hadn't changed in the last 2 either. And so I thought, well, that's true. And he says, now, if you're being called to ministry, you need to know what ministry God's calling you to. You should pray about that. But it's hard to understand that, so here's what you need to do. Sit down and write down all the things you don't like about the ministry you're in. I thought, okay, that's easy. Well, that was. Boy, it just flew. And then he says, when you're all done with that, the opposite of what you wrote down is what God is calling you to. I thought, that's interesting. I've never heard that advice before in my life, but I sat down and I wrote this thing. And some of you may have seen this. It's I think it's hidden somewhere on the webpage. We've never really published it. But this was kind of thing in some ways that launched Spirit Chapel Church. And I just want to read the first part of it to you, and we'll cut off from there. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but here's what I said in that. It's hard to watch something that matters to you die before your very eyes. And that is how I feel about the Christian church in America today. Once the most dominant force in American culture, it has drifted further and further from relevancy to the point where in a few decades, a preacher will have all the influence of a high school librarian. I'm not speaking of the church's political influence in America. I couldn't care less about that. The tragedy is that the American church is losing its ability to touch the lives of individuals. It no longer protects marriages, no longer guides young people in making decisions, no longer causes men to look at their lives and repent. Of all the statistics that I have read about the church in America lately, none of them is more damning than this. The rate of divorce among Christians is exactly the same as the rate of non-believers. Where's the difference? When the world looks at the church and says, why bother? It is hard to argue with them. The American church is salt that has lost its flavor, a light that is losing to the darkness, and a city that should be on the hill but is mired in the valley instead. Now, a lot of good people have been wringing their hands over the church's trajectory for decades. But I've recently come to the conclusion that they all have missed the point. Because the general consensus of all of them is that the death of the American church is due to societal changes. That is utter nonsense. To suggest the Christian church is the victim of circumstances beyond our control is to ignore the history of a church that has prevailed against all odds. This church, planted with the blood of Jesus' crucified hands and established by the power of his resurrected body, did not thrive for 2,000 years, only to fade now. It conquered the Roman Empire, but we're supposed to believe it cannot withstand the Facebook, ESPN, and smartphones? Listen to me. It doesn't matter what America is into. Jesus told us he would build his church on a rock, and the gates of hell could not prevail against it. And when he said these things, he knew that the internet, iPhones, and Twitter were coming. None of this surprises him. Neither an indolent society nor a hostile government can stop the Christian church. If it is dying in America today, we need to stop looking under rocks for excuses masquerading as reasons and start looking in the mirror. Because the truth is, if the American church is dying, it's because we are killing it. Us, not them, not Hollywood, not Washington, D.C. We're killing it. The very Christians who are going to church every week, we're not the victims, we're the problem. The funny thing is, no one debates that there is a problem. We just don't agree on its source. But the church cannot be failing because of the current hedonistic bent of America, not when it started in hedonistic Rome. It cannot be failing because of highly publicized scandals, not when it's already survived the Borgias, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Bartholomew's Day massacre. It cannot be failing because modern-day trendsetters have attacked its principles. The church has been attacked by man's intellect since Paul was named Saul. None of these explain a marginalization that has become so noticeable it's being measured by secular sources. A recent Gallup poll shows that 32% of Americans consider themselves non-religious. Less than 50% is a member of any church. Christianity has gone from the dominant force in this country, in fact, the very reason this country was founded, to a minority in less than 200 years. What happened? So I'm stopping there because I like that part, and from there I go off the rails. I actually, from there, start describing what I think the problem is and what we need to do about it. And I have to say, 8 years after looking back on it, my solution to the problem was wrong. So let me first talk about what I got right from there, because you'll see a lot of that in Spirit Chapel yet, and it's part of where we've been. So the church is not dying because of the current American culture. We know that. I mean, this is not true. Yes, it's easier to be a Christian in 1960 than today. No doubt about it. Back when I was in school, grade school, they still taught the Bible in school. It was still part of our curriculum. I'm talking about Central Elementary School right here in Elizabeth Township. Back those days, the culture pushed us to church because we used to be a Christian nation. But all that did was make it the easiest thing to do, was to be part of a church. It was actually harder not to be part of a church in those days. But that doesn't build strong Christians. That builds Christians because of society. And as soon as society changes, those Christians changed. So it shouldn't be any surprise that the people who were being forced by society into church left church as soon as the pressure was no longer there. But that doesn't mean the society is causing the problems. The question is, why is there pressure needed to go to church? Why do we need society to pressure us into it? Why do we need to make it easy for people to go to church? That's a problem. The church, however, did lose its focus. In my lifetime, I have watched the church lose its focus. It used to be, back when I was a kid, we talked about saving people. We talked about the difference between the saved and the unsaved. Now we talk about the church and the unchurched, and that's not the same thing. I think we all know you can come to church without being saved. We have dropped our standards to the point we don't care about people getting saved anymore. We just need to get them to church. If we can get them to church, then we're a success, because then our church grows. And church growth became the only metric that mattered in America. That's the scoreboard. If your church grows, you're successful. If your church doesn't grow, you're a failure. The reason we are the problem is the same reason that we have been the problem since Paul wrote a letter to Corinthians, because our fleshly desires fights with the Spirit. And if we don't understand that, if we don't understand that we're the ones that cause the issues, it's coming from us and our desires, and we're trying to manipulate the church to meet our desires, instead of coming to church to find out what God desires, we're never going to fix this. We have to understand that, the problem isn't even going to a different church. In fact, trying to solve the problem of your heart by switching churches is like trying to find nutrition from ice cream by switching flavors. It's just not there, right? You're not going to get it. And I can go to any church I want, I don't care how dynamic it is or how great the speaker is. If my problem is my heart, that is not going to be fixed by church. The only thing that changes the heart is the Holy Spirit. And the only thing that changes us is Jesus Christ. And if we ever make the church about us or anything around us, instead of about Jesus Christ, we have failed. So that's where I made my biggest mistake. Because I was convinced that our problem was people weren't going to church. That's not the problem. The problem is the church isn't transforming people. It doesn't matter how many people are here if none of us are getting transformed. Meanwhile, if just some of us are getting transformed, it matters a whole lot to heaven. Heaven does not rejoice by every soul that walks through a church door. Heaven rejoices by every soul that turns to Jesus and gets saved. We have to change the target here. We have to change where we're heading, and that's the biggest thing that we have to have. But I thought all we needed was better vision. Because if we could get people to church, and the reason we weren't getting people to church, because the vision was off. The church I was in had no vision at all. Right? Basically, it was a pastor who was coasting to retirement and just wanted to keep going until he retired. And just make sure everything stayed the same until he retired, which took years. But that was the idea. It was frustrating some of us who wanted more. And what was happening is we were hungering for the Word of God, but we didn't know it. We thought we wanted a better church service. What we wanted was a better picture of God. That's where I missed it. And so my vision wasn't how to get people a better picture of God. My vision was how can I get this thing so exciting people will want to come to it. And here's what I believe, tying back into our service for just 1 second. I believe this. This is a verse from the Bible, and I was surprised. I checked Saturday evening service. They'd never heard this verse before. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. Anybody heard that? Okay. I've heard this one a lot. Of course, I also attend a bunch of different seminars on church planning. That's a big one there. But it's a big one everywhere. I mean, I've heard it in financial management classes. I've heard it everywhere. I've preached on it early on in the church because this is what I thought. We need the right vision. If we get the right vision, we'll connect with the people and we'll just take off like a rocket because all we need to do is bring down the barriers of boredom and people will come running. If you build it, they will come. That's what we thought, because that's what I thought, because I believed this verse. Now, I don't often do this, but you'll notice I actually put the translation here next to the verse. King James Version. There's a reason I did that. Because there's like 32 different translations easily available to us. Go to BibleGateway.com or Blue Letter Bible or BibleHub.com, any of one of them. There are a bunch of different verses, all different translations. If you search for this verse in every other translation available to us, even going into the Hebrew versions, it never says this. The only translation that says this is King James. Now, I don't know what English meant in the 1600s. So I can't say they mistranslated it because it was translated way back then. One of the reasons I don't like the King James Version. But what this means today is I think what we all see. If I have a vision, we're good. If I don't have a vision, we'll perish. The problem is this word here for vision is actually better translated a dream, a revelation, or a prophetic vision. This verse is not talking about your vision or my vision. It's talking about God's vision. I missed that part because I actually pulled it out of King James myself. We all do. Every preacher. It doesn't matter what version you preach in. When you get to this one, man, you go to King James because it says it the way you want it to. We got to stop. The whole purpose of this series is making the Bible try to say what we want it to and read what the Bible's actually saying. Because if I would have read the correct translation and spend a moment to understand what the Bible was telling me, instead of saying, oh, I can take this version and use it the way I want it to, I would have seen that this is the correct version. This is the English Standard Version, but this is very similar to everybody else. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. What he's saying is, if God is not speaking to the people, he's talking to Israel, it's easy to forget he's there and just do whatever you want. When God stopped speaking through the prophets, it was easy for them to say, well, God's not looking. I guess I can get away with some stuff. That's what he's saying. But he goes on and says, but if you're faithful, and even when you haven't heard God lately, you still keep his law, then you'll be blessed. That's what he's saying. That's actually a really good verse. Too bad I completely missed it back in my early days. See, God had a vision for Spirit Chapel before I was born. That's what I missed. Before I was even born, he already had a vision for Spirit Chapel. And it included me, but it did not need me. That's something else that's humbling that I think every preacher needs to understand. If you remember the book of Esther, she has an opportunity to save Israel, her race of people, because she's a queen to the king, but it might cost her life. And she's in the quandary here. Well, should I do this or not? It's dangerous. It's scary. I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it. I'll be fine. And her uncle Mordecai tells her, look, maybe you were here for a time such as this. Maybe this was the reason God gave you here. And you have a chance right now to save your people. And then he adds this, but if you don't, he'll find somebody else to save his people. And you'll be forgotten in history. Right? That's the thing. God had a plan, included me, but didn't require me. And if I didn't do it, if I kept saying no and walked away, he would have found somebody else. He would have brought in somebody else. He will succeed. God's plans succeed without us. He doesn't need my vision. But here's my problem. Everywhere I went, every seminar I went to, every book I read, every blog post always said this about your church. Healthy things grow. You want to know if you want a healthy church, don't you? Well, no one plants a church they want to be sick. So yes, I want a healthy church. Well, healthy things grow. Do you want to see if your church is healthy? Is it growing? Now this creates something I call in my book, if some of you read it, the BIS syndrome, butts in seat. I want to know how many people are here. That's how I measure whether my church is successful. Well, if you want to make something successful in America, we know how to do it. It is, first of all, location, 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 so that was a bad choice. But beyond that, it's also just you plan the way they plan at McDonald's, the way you do Starbucks, the way you do all these things. You create something that people want, and they'll come from miles to get it. That goes back to P.T. Barnum said that first. Give people something they want to see, they'll come from miles around to see it. Bearded ladies or church, it works for both. That's the idea. We got to give them what they want. We want to lower the things, and so we did. We created this hyper-creative church that was like nuts. We run a system here like a lot of mega churches don't have. It's crazy what we're doing. But I was just convinced that this is going to bring the people, man. We're going to make it creative, and I'm a creative person. I'm figuring, well, God chose me. He must have wanted this too, so I'm going to pour all my creativity in this. And every sermon I preach to have at least 2 movie clips in it. Usually 3. Drive Victoria nuts. I'd be up Saturday night before the service trying to find that 3rd movie clip. And she says, you don't even need these. I says, yes, I do. This is our brand, I told her. This is what we do. You know what? It worked. We got 50 people coming here. When we opened up, we had 21 people in the building. Probably about 4 or 5 of those or more were just well-wishers. Like my mom came in from Ohio. She wasn't going to be a regular attendee, So we figured we had about 15 people who came that first week who might come back again the next week. How do you grow a church at 15? By the way, all the books tell you, man, you can't start with 15. You start with at least 60. So, okay, we're 15. What do? Well, we worked really, really hard. We tried everything. And we went from 15 to 50. And I'm counting adults now. I'm not talking kids. Some of you have been here a while. You remember there was a couple times in our first couple years, we had so many people in the building with their kids that there weren't enough chairs. And you had to wait in the back if you came late until the kids went off to their program so you could get a seat. Some of you remember that. We're up to 50. And everybody said, what are you going to do, Mark? What are you going to do? We need a new building. You need another service. And I said, just wait. Because pretty soon it contracted to about 30. And then we'd start some new program or something. We'd get back up to 50. And then back to 30. Because what happens when you have a crowded church building like that is people don't like to come. And when you create a consumer church, the customer's always right. And they're like, you know what? I don't like this. I think I'll stay home this week and watch the Steeler pregame show instead. And pretty soon one week turned into 5, and they weren't here anymore. Because that's what happens in consumer church. Whenever your game slips just a little tiny bit, they're like, yeah, I have a better choice. I can go do that instead. The weird thing about the consumer-based church, which is really the model, the modern American church, it really is that in the consumer-based model, the customer's always right. And yet, if you watch Jesus Christ, the customer's almost never right. He's walking around telling everybody they're wrong all the time. What a horrible consumer reference person he is. In fact, I've mentioned this before, but Francis Chen was a mega church pastor. He was driving on the road. He was in Simi Valley, California. He had mega church, beautiful building and nice deal, 6-figure salary. He's driving down the road with his wife. He turns to his wife and he says, you know what? If Jesus Christ had a church in Simi Valley, I'd have more people than him. And his wife looked over him like, oh man, where is this going, He says, let me hear me out. Here's why. Because Jesus didn't know how to keep a crowd, and I do. In fact, if you look in the Bible, he's always dismissing the crowds. It's like he doesn't want the crowds. Every time he gets 5,000 people, he sends them away. See, I don't do that. I get 5,000 people and try to figure out how I can get 10. I can get and keep crowds better than anyone. That means I'm doing something wrong. And he resigned his position from the church. That's amazing to me, what he walked away from, by the way. He became a missionary in China for a while. That's just astounding to me that someone looked at it, saw it so clear, and said, well, then I'm wrong. If I'm not doing what Jesus is doing, I'm wrong. And that's the message that I was in a mega church with 5,000 people coming. But that was a message that took me a lot longer to learn. I hate to tell you this, but here's the deal about this whole healthy thing and growth. The purpose of the church is not to grow by getting more people to come to the church. The purpose of the church is to get the people to grow by adding Jesus to their lives. Amen. That's the purpose of the church. It doesn't matter how many people are here. Everybody who's here should have an opportunity to get a better understanding of God to help them change in their lives. And if that isn't the first thing we're focused on, we're doing it wrong. Because that's the whole purpose of the church. So let me tell you a couple lessons that Marky learned in his first 5 years. I started getting it at about 6 or 7. Lack of creativity is not the problem, as I said. Focusing on creativity will make people want to come to church, but it fosters a consumer-based Christianity, which we do not want. Anything that makes the church about us instead of Jesus is a failure. Now, let me stop on that one for a second, because we think we know what that means, but it means a lot more than we think. See, when I say, if we're trying to make the church about us, it's a mistake, you're thinking, yeah, right, I shouldn't be selfish, I shouldn't be trying to, go get material gain and use Jesus to get it. Yeah, we get it. Name it, claim it's wrong. We understand that. But it goes beyond that. If someone were to ask you what church you go to, and let's say, for sake of argument, you said Spirit Chapel, and then they said, why? What's your answer? Because when I ask that question to people, because I meet them all the time, oh, what church do you go to? Oh, why do you go there? What I get frequently is it's down the road from me. It's close. That's, in Pittsburgh, a very big thing, man. We have a borough mentality. If you have to cross a bridge, forget it. It's like, no. That all the way over there. Cross the Boston Bridge, no way. I don't know, it's like, that made sense back in the 1800s, but we still have that mentality today. In Pittsburgh, in Texas, man, we get up and drive 20 minutes to church and think nothing of it. But here, no one drives 20 minutes. Well, okay, some of y'all, hardly anyone drives more than 20 minutes. Not around here. So that's part of it. It's close, it's convenient. But another big part of it is, all my friends are there. I love to go see the people. I have a lot of friends there. That's a huge, huge reason. Some people, the children's program is really good. So I go there for the children's program. I used to go to a really horrible church because it had a great children's program, or so I thought. And then I started realizing, okay, if the preacher's teaching me garbage, what are they teaching my kid? It's like they may be having a good time. Never had to fight her to go because she loved it. They like climbing walls and slides and everything inside the church. But what were they teaching? She knew how to slide. So why are any of those on our top list? The only answer should be on the top of your list, and I'm not telling you how to answer that question, because this is what Christians say, oh, okay, I got to answer that question that way next time. That's not what I'm trying to tell you here. I'm just telling you, if your question is because, man, I meet Jesus there, I feel the Spirit, I feel convicted, then it's the wrong answer. And I think you need to realize, why are you going to church? Have you made it about you? I just feel good when I'm there. Why? I don't know. because it's better than what I would have done if I hadn't gone? I mean, there are questions we need to ask ourselves and be honest about. Number two, the church is already relevant. Boy, this is something that took me a while to learn, because this is what they teach you. Man, if you're going to preach today, you got to make your sermons relevant to people's lives. Make them relevant. Like, okay, make them relevant. Movie clips, references to pop culture. I got that. No, I don't need to make the gospel relevant. It's already relevant. And we have to start having faith in the word. Jesus is already relevant. I don't need to make him relevant. He's been relevant for 2,000 years. Now it's up to me to be his PR department? No. He's already relevant. I just need to have faith in that. I say, no, Jesus is relevant. And you're going to hear about him, and that's it. The focus of the church cannot be on how to bring people to church. Can't do that, because the church has never saved anyone. Only Jesus can. Amen. We have to realize that. Therefore, after all that, the conclusion I come to after about 6 years of struggle is this: the American church is dying because it deserves to die. Because if the church isn't about Jesus, who needs it? He warned us about this himself. One of his first parables he ever taught. This is what he says. He says, "You're the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It's good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men," which is what is happening to the American church, and it deserves it because it's no longer salty. We have done that. We have made the church almost indistinguishable from the world. Oh, you want a rock band? We'll get one. You want a smoke show? Oh, we'll get a smoke show. You want a light show? We'll give you light shows. You want relevant sermons? The pastor will pull a Lamborghini on the stage, swear to God I saw this, and teach you that God is like a Lamborghini. A series. That wasn't a sermon. He did a series on it. My own eyes, I saw that. We'll just make it like a car show. And it'll be great. We'll have a bowling alley and climbing walls, and we'll have... this is there, I'm telling you. He says, man, I want to go to that church. Who has a climbing wall? Gym inside, coffee shop, bookstore, the whole business. And look, if that were just called a Christian activity center, where Christians go and hang out in the evenings with their kids and stuff, that'd be great. But it's replaced the church, which is supposed to teach us about the gospel. And that's the problem. And I've told you this before, but when I first read this, I was really troubled by this verse, because I thought, what is Jesus talking about? Salt cannot lose its flavor. It's one of the most stable compounds on earth. You can crush it, burn it, boil it, melt it. Doesn't matter what you do to salt. You taste it when it's over. It still tastes like salt. Salt absolutely cannot lose its flavor. What is Jesus talking about? Jesus is like making some exaggeration. And then one day, I'm sitting there watching Chopped with my wife on Food Network, this show, where they take 4 things in a basket that a hobo wouldn't eat together, and to make chefs make a meal out of it, and then bubble gum and all kind of stuff. And this person was doing it. They only had 20 minutes to make it, and they're cooking, and they're tasting, and he says, and they had like an interview with the person playing in the background. He said, I tasted it, and I realized it was too salty. So I reached for more flour, and I added it to cut the salt. I went, oh. That's what Jesus is saying. He's not talking about a grain of salt. He's talking about a handful of salt. He's talking about the church. When we start mixing things in, salt loses its saltiness. And we mixed all kind of things in with the church. Here's a very small list. We have mixed in the culture. Positive thinking is now part of the church. Rah. Traditions, we've mixed them in for a long time. Traditions, as long as you do these traditions, these 5 things, you have a real church. And teaching of men, even teaching of Satan's made in the church. The Wiccan teaching is right in the church. Taught by not most, but a lot of the mega churches. We played this game one time in Bible study. I went to wicca.org, I think, the official website of Wiccans, and I pulled a bunch of their things, just cut and pasted. And I changed the word spirit to God. And I went to Joel Osteen's church and pulled a bunch of his stuff. And I went to Joyce Meyer's book and pulled the stuff out of her book. And we played a game. I brought up random stuff. And I'd say, Joyce and Joel or Wiccan. And nobody got more than 50% right. I actually had to go back and check. Indistinguishable. Part of the church. Why should this church succeed? Why would Jesus stand up for this church? This is not the church Jesus died for. He's not going to support it. He's not going to support it. Something we don't quite get is something that C.S. Lewis said. This is a hard thing to grasp, but take a minute on it. He who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God alone. If you have God, he's everything. If you have everything, you can't add anything to it. God plus a big house is no better for you than God alone. And I had to kind of reframe my whole world as God was slowly working on me and teaching me. You're not trying to do my vision. It's like he sat back for 3 or 4 years and said, okay, let's see what happens here, Mark. You got your vision? Okay, go ahead. See how it goes. Wore me out. I could never get over that 50 person hump. I couldn't get through it. Just wore me out. I'm like, I'm done. I was going to quit. I had 9 people show up once for Sunday morning, and we didn't have a Saturday service then. 9 people. Adults. I never count kids because kids don't have a choice. They get dragged here. I want the people who actually decided to come to church. That's who we count. 9 people in the audience. And I told Victoria, look, 9 people, we can have them over for breakfast. We can all sit around the table. I don't need to do all the stuff we're doing in a church for 9 people. I can have a Bible study. I don't need a church. I'm going to shut it down. She's like, oh, you can't shut it down. I said, you just watch me. And those of you who knew, I signed a lease, man, for 5 years. I was on the hook for 5 years. We were in year 3. I said, I got 2 more years in that lease. And I'll keep it going for 2 more years. But I'm telling you right now, if I still have 9 people in the audience, I'm shutting it down. She said, you can't do that. It's God's church. I said, well, then he better step up and save it, because if this church doesn't grow in 2 more years, it's done. I've had it. It's too hard. I'm not growing. I tried so hard, and nothing's being blessed. I'm not a blessed church. I'm quitting. Jesus eventually would take me to the mat with that one. I've told this story before, but shortly after that big discussion, I was getting ready to do something I'd never done before. I was going to preach a sermon I'd preached before. The sermon of David versus Goliath. Yeah, my favorite sermon. But I knew it was going to change. In the back of my mind, I knew it was going to change. I got the whole sermon prepared, and I'm looking at it. I was here on a Saturday night. I thought, this is missing something. I don't know what, but I could feel it. There's something missing. And I thought I had it right the first time, And then God revealed something to me. For 40 days, these 2 armies stood opposite each other and didn't attack, because you had to go down a valley and up a valley in order to attack. And as soon as you did that, you'd be fighting an uphill battle, because they just wait for you to start up the hill and then come down. And the armies were completely evenly matched. And they knew whoever attacked first lost. So they sat there shouting insults to each other for 40 days. This is one of the most ridiculous scenes you can imagine. Every day, your job as a soldier out there, beat on your sword and call them names. Your father stank of elderberries and, whatever. For 40 days. All that changes one day when David arrives. And he wasn't even there to fight. He was there delivering cheese and bread. He was a kid. He was an errand boy. The only thing that changed wasn't some new master strategy that the king came up with. It wasn't some secret thing that was going to hurl fireballs at the enemy. It wasn't the army of the dead that Ezekiel found and brought to them to add to their number. None of those things that Hollywood would do. The only thing that changed is one heart dedicated to God walked on the battlefield. One heart fully committed to God stepped on that battlefield in a body of a 15-year-old kid, and it changed history. And as I started making that last slide about the importance of one heart, God got me. He said, if one heart comes through there, will you keep Spirit Chapel open? Because that's the economy of heaven. One heart. One heart. Will you keep it open for one heart? I said, yes. But I swear, God, if it's just me and Victoria here, I am closing it down. I actually said that. God still doesn't strike me with lightning. It's just amazing. Okay, so the purpose of the church is the purpose of us. I'm going to go through this really quickly because I spent too much time on the rest of this. I don't want to keep you past lunch. You'll all turn surly on me. The sugar's going to wear off, and you're going to turn surly. In the beginning, this is the purpose. This is the purpose of us. And the church is the purpose is to fulfill this. So God said in the very beginning, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let him have dominion over the fish, the sea, the birds, the air, the cattle, over everything on earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And then he blessed them, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have a dominion over the fish and the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Okay, so from all that, I don't have time to break this down. You have to trust me on this one. Number one purpose is we're supposed to have communion with God. The very first thing we're created for was to be part of a community. Notice they said, let us. Who's he talking to? Well, that's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the Father says to the Holy Spirit and the Son, hey, let's do this. Let's make somebody in our image. What's their image? Perfect communion with each other. You know, we always think about what we look like, but they're talking about an image. That includes the communion with God, which was the most important thing they had. So we were born to have that. We see this in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 6:4-5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with God with all of your heart, all of your soul, with all of your strength. When Jesus quotes this verse, he adds mind. And then he says this is the number one commandment given to you. This is your purpose. This is your mission statement in life. And the church's mission statement in life is help you with this. Period. Full stop, you can end it right there. That's the number one reason we have. Number two, however, purpose comes out of there, was we're supposed to create God-centered family and communities. Now we miss this because they say be fruitful, multiply, and because of our minds being what they are, we're thinking he's only talking about sex. Sex and kids, fruitful, multiply, that's what we think. But fruit's more than just having more kids. It's producing God's fruit. We're supposed to be producing God's fruit in our families, in our lives, and in our communities. We're supposed to multiply God's blessings and God's fruits by being godly people. Again, moving back to Deuteronomy, these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You will talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk, by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You're supposed to teach your kids all of this constantly on your mind. And last, God's commandment to us is to manage his blessings. Again, we miss that. He says, subdue the earth. Go out and get control of the whole earth. Right? But if you think about it, what was the earth then? Perfect. Did they have to plant? No. There were trees already in the garden. Did they have to rustle up the cattle and the sheep? No. They're already there. God had already provided everything for them. They're supposed to manage the blessings he had provided. Back again into Deuteronomy. Everything we have is a blessing. There's nothing we made. Watch this. This is what he says to his people. So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into land he swore to your fathers to give you a large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. I'm giving you everything already done. You don't even have to work for it. They're all blessings from God's hands. But here's the thing. When you're all eaten and full, when you're fat, full, and happy, don't forget that God gave you everything. See, this is what we have to remember. Everything we have is from God. And we're greatly blessed. Oh, man, are we greatly blessed. So we're supposed to do that. So Spirit Chapel Change. We started out with a little slogan that said, anything but church as usual. That was our slogan, year one. We just want to be different, want to be changing. And then year three, after we lost Roberta and we kind of struggling to understand what was going on, I changed from trying to reach all the unchurched to try to reach the people who used to be church but quit. I thought that'd be easier. So our motto changed to this: have you given up on church but not on God? Welcome home. Some of you may remember that sign we used to have up. And then year five, when God really got a hold of my heart, I realized, okay, we need to simply become a Christian church. And finally, the prophetic word was spoken to me. Right in that year between 3 and 5, God's prophetic voice came to me. Not to me personally, mind you. He sent somebody. That's bad. That's a bad sign, by the way. When God has to send somebody else with his prophetic word, it means you ain't listening. But we were here, and we had a person who came to church occasionally, not all the time. And she came in, and she was really, I could tell, emotional. And it was after church. She said, I have to tell you something. I said, okay. She says, I have a message to you from the Lord. I said, all right, but I don't want to give it to you. I said, well, probably don't want to hear it then. If that's the case, let's forget this. And she goes, well, he told me I need to tell you. So, okay, maybe I better hear it. And she says, but he also says it's good. I said, okay, well, maybe I do want to hear it. Go ahead, And we're kind of winding up. She goes, I want you to know I've been out in my car before the service started. I didn't want to come in. I did know she came in late. She says, because this is making me nervous. I don't feel I have the right to tell you anything. You're the preacher and I'm not. And I said, look, if God gave you a message for me, tell me the message. He said, okay. She said, okay, I don't know what this means, but he said you will. Please, by now, just give me the message, right? And this is what she told me. She said, God said this, the pace of the shepherd determines the speed of the flock. I guess it showed up on my face. Because she looked at me, she says, is that good? I said, that's real good. Because it was the answer to the prayer I was praying. I was trying to figure things out. Here's what you'll know about this. I'm not the shepherd. Jesus is. And I was trying to figure out why Spirit Chapel wasn't growing like I thought it should grow. What are we doing wrong? I mean, I know I'm trying to let go of this, but and if you just want to look at the fruit of the people's lives, that doesn't seem like I'm seeing some changes in some people, some changes in my own life, but not very much, not very fast. And it seems like this isn't moving along nearly as fast as I thought we should be moving along. However you want to measure it. What's going on? And I was so busy screaming he couldn't get to me, so he sends somebody else. He says, it moves at my pace, Mark, not yours. And I went, okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay saying, you know what, God? That's fine. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for the sandal prints in front of me in the grass. I'm going to put my foot right there and follow. And if I don't see a sandal print, I'm going to stand still until I see the next one. I'm just going to go as fast as you go. And I'm going to be content with that. And I'm not going to look around anymore. See, this is the final thing we came to. We're just a small church that serves a great God. And I'm okay with that. In fact, then God did give me another verse. He gave me one in Revelation. He says this in Revelation to me, if I can find it. Well, here. You have little strength. I love this. Yeah, that's us. Little church. Yet you've kept my word, you've not denied my name, and you've kept my commandment to endure patiently. That's the church's mission statement. Yours is to love the Lord your God with all your soul, all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. The church's is to keep his word, never deny the name of Jesus, and keep the command to endure patiently. That's all that matters. Paul, writing to his protege Timothy, says this. There are so many who are conceited, and they understand nothing. They have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, and malicious talk. Evil suspicions, constant friction between people of a corrupt mind. Have you met these people, by the way? Always fighting, always creating division and strife. They've been robbed of the truth. They think that godliness is a means to financial gain. That's not the purpose of your relationship with Jesus. And it isn't your scoreboard to know how your relationship's going. This is what he's trying to say. They think that's right, but it's absolutely wrong. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment. Contentment with your portion. Be content with what God's given you. And be godly in that contentment. And that's great gain. That's how we should try to live. Being content and godly is all that should matter to us. It doesn't matter what car you drive, what house you're in, where you live. Can you be content with what God's given you? Because if you're godly in there, if you're righteous, inside of that, you will have great gain. We are a small church that serves a great God. But God knows each of you by name. Would you all please pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you that your vision is the one that matters. And we thank you that you keep coming back and keep teaching us new things. I pray that you will bring us to a new understanding of you. We need to love you with all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our soul, and all of our strength. And learn to be content with what you give us. And then we will have great gain.